So, you're going to tell us how we can best get really big. That's the plan for the next 20 minutes or so, and it's very good to have you all here, because I think you represent a lot of different insights and a lot of different methods for the entrepreneurs amongst us who would like to scale up. I guess I want to talk about cultural and structural challenges, and just to kind of get us going, I'd like to start with you, Jane, because I think, you know, I know that you worked at the very beginnings of Starbucks, taking it into the enormous global brand that it is now. And you, I know, saw huge challenges in taking that initial entrepreneurial passion into something that was going to work in really disparate markets. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
I think the most important thing to think about when you're talking about growth is that that which starts it is not always that which grows it best, and certainly not that which manages it when it gets there. So the entrepreneur who comes up with tons of ideas and is fearless and can do all these things is a very different person than the one who runs the big organization. And sometimes it happens, but usually it doesn't happen that way. So I think we were talking before about partnership and bringing in people who are better than you are and that sort of thing. But there is a constant tension between an entrepreneur and growth. What entrepreneurs love are ideas, but the growth part of it, as much as you want your idea to be bigger, managing a big bureaucracy is not in your nature. So that's my biggest thought.
Now, Dharmash, I know that you will have seen a whole load of entrepreneurs coming to you saying, please, we'd like the investment to become big. What is it that you're looking for at that point?
Well, look, as a venture capitalist, I guess you're looking for two or three things. One is clearly you're looking at the individual and the team. And their skills, because at an early stage, I think you need to be super flexible because you don't know all the answers. You've got a first sense of your product market fit and how you might meet a customer needs, but to make a truly great, significant company, you're going to learn from your customer, you're going to learn from the market and iterate fast. And so you're assessing the individuals and the quality of team they put together. The second thing, at the venture stage, which is very importantly different from seed, different from growth, different from buyout, very different. At the venture stage, what you're looking for is some set of execution skills proven in market. So you're looking for some traction, some engagement with customers, etc., and showing how the team have predictably gone from A to B because they can understand how to go from A to B, therefore they can do it again.
And I mean, Marcus, when you have companies wanting to float on AIM, can you identify the ones you think are going to do really well? I mean, can you see a kind of company, a kind of individual even, who's going to be able to make that jump?
Well, it's interesting. One of the bits of my job that I kind of enjoy the most is actually when we do welcome companies to the market, both across AIM and the main market. And I think you can really tell where you've got a management team that is very cohesive and where there's a real passion in the business and where they're really keen to tell the story about that business, because of course people talk about the stock market and they talk about liquidity and corporate governance and codes and all that good stuff, but actually as much as anything a lot of these businesses IPO to raise their profile and their visibility. So quite often I would come away from kind of Welcome to and think, yeah, that's a company that's going somewhere. I'm not always right, but you can normally tell.
Now, when people come to you looking for investment, is the money there? Because that's what we've heard a lot over the last year in putting together the Growth Britannia report. They're saying, it's all very well having the ideas, the ambition, the wish to go global, but we need investment and people aren't investing.
So I guess I'd probably have a contrary view and say the money is there. So kind of two or three different things.
Where?
There are lots of different sources of money. So for example, at an early stage, it's angel investment. At a certain stage with scale, it might be venture. There might be some sense of debt financing. But the best source of revenue, the best source of funding is revenue. And you saw Nick Wheeler and how he built his business, organically growing it, etc. So there are sources of funding and creative ways to get funding. The second thing is markets tend over time to be efficient. i.e. if there are great entrepreneurs with great ideas with sufficient traction, the money will meet that traction. And I think what you're seeing in the market really is the best deals with the best entrepreneurs getting real traction are oversubscribed. And the competition and the pricing in the market is going through the roof, which is why people call it a bubble. And so I think the supply and demand economics, to me, say it's not totally there, but it's partially there, and they'll tend towards a norm. But the challenge is getting enough experience into the ecosystem in Europe and learning and being willing to fail and getting people who have done it before to put money back in the system and to work with those companies to help them grow.
Jane, I love the stories that you were telling us earlier, actually, but when we were chatting before, about taking Starbucks global, because I think it's a really good example of something that many entrepreneurs face, which is suddenly having to do things differently, and maybe, as you say, having to find people who can do the jobs you're not very good at. Go on, tell us a few.
My favorite story is when we were trying to open in the Philippines, and finally Starbucks management had realized that the international opportunity was big. We had one store in Japan and one in Singapore. We didn't count Canada as international, because you didn't fly over a large body of water to get there. Hawaii was international, which was good for me, because I did international. But so we were opening in the Philippines, and we got a call that the floor tile for the first restaurant was stuck on a ship in Manila Harbor. And there was no way they could get off. We just knew that we weren't going to get the store open. So we had to all prance into Howard Schultz's office and tell him. And he just told the New York Times that we were opening in the Philippines, so you didn't want to not do that. And so he said, this place has become such a bureaucracy. In the old days, if we ran out of coffee beans at the Pike Place Market store, we would just go down to the roasting plant and put a bag of beans in the car and drive them to the store. And we thought, okay, well, if you want to start bribing the harbor master and setting the whole entire tone of how you want to do business in another part of the world, we could do that. It's not the same thing as driving down to the roasting plant and filling the back of your car with coffee beans and taking them there. So I think we had a lot to learn. We were still really passionate about the idea. We had the right team, but we just didn't think in that big systematized way where thousands and thousands of people have to find a way to live the vision. It's easy when it's in your heart and you think it up. It's harder when you're trying to communicate to a lot of people who you've never even met.
And it doesn't always match the brand sort of value, does it? Or the cultural value to say, oh, well, we'll produce a manual.
Right. Well, that was the other thing. And I'll bore you with one more story. I had to do the first opening in Taiwan, and they called and they said they wanted the documents. And I said, what documents? They said the binder. And so one of our criteria for selecting partners were people who had partnerships, joint ventures with other multinational companies. And so they would pay 5% of their sales to a marketing budget, and they expected the binder. And so I walk into my boss's office and I say, is there a binder that no one showed me before? And he said, no, for what? And I said, for market opening. He goes, Toronto was a really good market opening, and I think Joe did that. And Joe still works here. You might want to go talk to him. And I thought, we promised this group of people that we would give them all the support they needed, and what they want is a binder, and we are so far from ever having a binder. And we had thousands of stores. So it's amazing how sometimes simple things can make a big difference.
I think Joe from Toronto sounds great.
I know. I never found him, actually, because Canada was, not an international market.
Everyone's looking for Joe.
Right. Joe's here somewhere.
But Dharmash, when you're looking, as I say, at companies that may have that potential to go global, do you actually get down and dirty with them and advise them on the kind of staff they're going to need to put in place?
Yes. Look, I think separating two things. One, there's kind of sourcing money, and then the second is the quality of mentors with experience who have done it before, who are attached to that money. And I think there's so much debate about the money, but the second piece is probably more important. Yes. And I don't know why the debate is not about getting the quality of investors who have done it before, who have experience. Because if you haven't built a sales force and missed up the incentive, you haven't gone international and made 5 mistakes, you haven't built an organization and realized communication is really important, it's really difficult to sit on a board and help entrepreneurs and coach them. And the thing that entrepreneurs, when I talk to entrepreneurs and I work with entrepreneurs, what they'd say is, our best learnings are all your mistakes.
I think that's absolutely right. One of the things that we continue to hear from businesses that have got really high growth potential is they just they're so focused on the day-to-day and the running of the business that they don't often have the opportunity to stand back and look at what all of the different options are. So from an early stage, understanding the interaction between bank finance and business angels and venture capital, and ultimately potentially the capital markets. And I think that's one of the things that since the financial crisis has really changed. Those different providers of finance kind of explaining the whole package and a lot more kind of whether it's government schemes or schemes like Elite that we launched last week, that are really helping on the education side. I think that is really critical.
But I think one of the debates might be, is the capital in the right places with people who can actually help, as opposed to it being wasted.
Yeah.
Most of the boards I've sat on, 10 or 15, I've spent as much time managing the other investors as working with the entrepreneurs. Because if you haven't built a company, everyone's got an idea of what to do, but you want to grow a company, you need to focus. And that is some of the issues in terms of where the money is in the wrong pockets with people without the experience, without the track records. Because being an investor is, I'm now an entrepreneur, and I've learned a lot from being an investor and running and built companies before. And I think each time you jump a fence, you learn a whole load of new things.
I'd like to open this up because we've got so many entrepreneurs in the audience here, for startups to people who run big companies. We've got 5 minutes left and we have this wealth of talent on the stage, so please, could I take some questions from you guys about this whole issue of going from startup to scale up? Here we have a gentleman in the suit, who I met earlier, in fact. Hello. Hello. Would you like to introduce yourself to the rest of the audience?
Yes, certainly. My name is Richard Jones from Coffee Planet. I'd like to address the question to Marcus. I wonder how many I wonder how many.
So I can hear you.
I wonder how many entrepreneurs actually enjoy the experience or stay in the business if they come into the capital markets because of perhaps the increased regulation or the increased sort of standardization, if you like, some of the things that the rest of us might hate the idea of.
Okay. I think one of the
attraction.
Yeah, so there are multiple attractions, and I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, actually, whilst we talk about kind of regulation and preparing companies for an IPO, actually, oftentimes that preparation means that a company ends up in a better position. So there's been thought that's given to the structure of that business, to the overall composition of the board to make that business more sustainable. So what strikes me often is when we talk about big aspirational companies or the next billion-dollar company, people always refer to public companies, whether it's the Just Eats and the ASOS's, the monetizers in the UK, or whether it's Facebook and Google in the US. And so the flip side of some of that kind of structure is often that these businesses have a higher profile and a credibility and are able to reach a much wider set of customers and stakeholders. So I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, actually that is, it can really incentivize them, and it's not seen as just being a kind of a restriction, because the other thing is that you've then got a whole range of shareholders that you're communicating with, rather than potentially one or two dominant shareholders that you have to spend all of your time managing. So it's clearly horses for courses, but I don't think it's as kind of structured, and certainly not kind of constraining in the way that some people think it is.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Oh, gentleman at the back there, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Amir Hassan. I'm CEO of Minicabit. It's a question for Dharmash, actually. So it's quite a curious move from being a venture capitalist to starting up your own business. What sort of challenges have you seen in that sort of cultural shift?
Lots. Well, look, I had the fortune of working with hundreds of entrepreneurs for the last 5 or 6 years. But I also was fortunate in terms of I had a 15-year career launching businesses in media and retail and a whole host of others. I think, and again, no matter how often you work in new businesses, on whatever side of the fence you're in, you're constantly learning. And you're making mistakes, and you're learning from mistakes, and you're learning from customers and constantly iterating. So I think, if I was to just pinpoint a few things, and I guess there's no correct answer. One, you underestimate the amount of administration running the company at your peril. And I think infrastructure, governments, whatever the tax systems, how VAT works, how NI works, whatever it is, they're all hurdles. And streamlining these things to focus on products and customers and consumers would be a good thing. I think the second thing is, I know we're lucky given the nature of the team, but I can see without being very well networked and knowing people, it's very hard to get on. and trying to build the ecosystem and encouraging others and working with others and putting something back in the system is going to be and will be increasingly important for success.
We don't really have time, but Perry, go on quickly.
Just the panel's view on our woeful performance on exporting, which obviously is a criteria for scaling.
Yeah. So who would you?
Panel,
what is the panel's view?
I have no view.
So I probably have a limited view, but I'm not sure I don't really understand why there necessarily needs to be a strategy for export in general, as opposed to case by case, sector by sector, company by company. And I'm a kind of believer in making markets simple and making life simple for the entrepreneur to allow each business and each decision maker to make that decision as easy as possible.
And briefly, Marcus?
Yeah, I think exporting is important for growth, and we certainly see amongst the companies that come to the public markets that tend to be that little bit bigger, that part of that raising finance can often be to help finance an export strategy. And I think the other thing, I know it's kind of labouring the point again, but that increased kind of global profile that comes out of being a public company often then supports that export strategy.
Thank you all very much indeed. We are going to have to draw this particular session to a close, but I hope you found it as interesting as I did. Ladies and gentlemen, Dharmash, Marcus and Jane.